Oh, never mind. I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Oh.
There we go. So used to using the actual function key. So good morning, and hope everyone's day is going well. This is my cover slide, which should warn you that I'm jaded, cynical, and kind of a smart aleck. I saw this one night on a Twitter referred me out to this definition of InfoSec, and the funny thing is I was really drunk when I saw it. So except for whiskey, I was on vodka because got dinged by my doctor as being kind of pre-diabetic, so I had to switch everything over and create a new thing to drink. So just vodka, soda water, and a splash of Key West lime juice. And as I told him, I'm like, you know, I'm in InfoSec, so at least once a weekend I'm going to binge drink just to wash all the stupidity away. So anyway, this topic is what we do anyway. The reason I came up with it is because I realized that even though you have all these neat control frameworks and all this other stuff that we do in InfoSec, from a controls and technical controls and basically technology standpoint, ideally all of your technologies are driven by process. There's a good dozen things or so that we all do anyway. So my standard disclaimer, and I'm just going to go through, make up some time here a little bit. Basically, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Sometimes I even make the same mistake twice. If I come off as a smart aleck, it's because I am, and I'm also jaded and cynical. If I come off as hyper, even though you don't see me in person and I have my webcam disabled because I'm extremely paranoid, I'm hyperactive as well. If I do need to slow down, just somebody shout out if you can put a question in, because my screen's in full screen, and just let me know that I need to kind of slow it down a bit. This slide's just in every one of my decks because, you know what, I grew up in the 80s and, you know, the Cold War and all that, and nuclear bombs are cool. So basically what happens is, like I alluded to, everyone eventually comes to the conclusion that we're here to mitigate risks, risk equaling likelihood by impact, right? And then it's all about figuring out how likely is something to happen. If it does, what's the worst that can happen? Although that can put you into a Chicken Little scenario where everything's always the worst case scenario when the sky is falling, especially knowing how people move laterally through networks. Once they get in, they get in. So it is what we do as risk. I'm just going to go through a couple samples real quick. Like for likely, are systems patched and hardened? Do you know that they're not patched and hardened regularly? Do they require two-factor? Are they on the internet? Are they external facing? What skills would be needed to attack it? Is there code or canned exploits existing? That increases your likelihood of something bad happening, right? Potential impacts usually try to tie it to financial. Those are always kind of funny numbers. Or downtime, or number of records stolen. Bad press, although it's never been proven to hit stock price that much overall. When you have something that you have to announce publicly, it does increase your costs because you have to notify people, etc. So there's like a cost per record that Ponemon puts out there. Bottom line, getting hacked is going to cost you money somehow. And basically, a lot of us use matrices like these. Basically, you might have a 4x4 or a 5x5. The one here is a 5x5. What it comes down to with getting stuff into a risk posture is, you know, the world can't end every day. Yes, anything's possible, but how real probable is it, right? So, and I've seen environments where I've tried to put a lot of math behind it. It still ends up the same thumb to the wind, so much so that NASA does the 5x5 as well. In a lot of companies, I actually boil it down to a 4x4. Still allows for gray matter and other factors that won't translate into a neat chart or a mathematical calculation of just stuff you know about the environment. You can get a lot of the knowledge of the environment specifically into your analysis. So, and then the other thing to keep in mind is you've got stuff like I'm showing the CIS community attack model. Basically, there's certain ways people get in. They might recon, do an initial compromise. They might elevate privilege, move around laterally, establish persistence, steal the data, etc. That kind of leads back to why we do similar things no matter what control sets we're under, whether it's CIS controls, whether it's NIST CSF controls, whether you've got PCI, whether you've got SOX. Basically, what it all comes down to is we're trying to figure out how much do you want to spend. And that smart aleck comment to the bottom, if you don't agree with me, Log on to Twitter sometime. For some reason, InfoSec people seem to discredit themselves an awful lot in the business areas. And when they're in the meetings with the big kids, like the vice presidents and above, because you need to spend money now on all of this stuff or something bad's going to happen. You wouldn't buy $5,000 worth of life insurance or car insurance for your car to pay every month, right? So you shouldn't be telling your company to do that either. InfoSec's all about doing due care and diligence of your customers' data, et cetera, whatever you're trying to protect, and trying to find the right spend, knowing risk never fully goes away. And we all know you can accept it, you can mitigate it, you can try to transfer it. Bottom line is you need to not be telling people to spend 80 bucks to protect a $100 bill. That's really risk management in a nutshell. What is the right amount for your company to protect per dollar for you to spend to show due diligence, knowing nothing's ever going to be perfect. And if anyone really, really wants to get you, they probably can. That's the zero-sum game thing you'll hear people talk about. So what do we end up doing anyway? Well, you harden your stuff as much as you can. Typically, you'll normalize over the highest standard and try to get everything up to that. You're going to do patching / vulnerability management. They seem to get bundled together. They're slightly different. Not all vulnerabilities are patchable. Like a blank admin password is more dangerous than missing some of the patches you might have. Segment your network if you can afford it. I've seen some environments where people were like, yeah, it must be nice to have money to firewall everything off all over. You've usually got some kind of host network detection or prevention. You've got anti-malware tools. That's where people start throwing the old pattern-based is useless. And the reality is stuff like SEP&NET actually saves thousands of dollars of nuisance time and money you would waste. So that's why they're still in corporate environments. Plus they're a no-brainer for renewal budgets. Then you got DLP for masochists. I think as people move into stuff like Google's Office and Microsoft's Office up in the cloud, DLP will become easier and more doable. To me, it's just always been massively painful and something I avoid. You're always going to have an advanced something. You can call it the EDR, whatever you want to call your advanced endpoint, whatever it is this year. You're always going to have something like that. Not making light of it. It's just, it's going to be there. I'm not going to bother putting a name on it because back when it was Intercept and Okina, way back in the early 2000s, we called it WIPs on the endpoints. And that was the new thing that was going to save us from everything. Then you got web application firewalls, you've got log management. File integrity management is usually forced on people by PCS. You might have some proxy services, and then you'll have SDLC, the whole new DevSecOps thing, which is finally getting the press that it should get. So hardening, almost everyone in the world bases it on Center for Internet Security checklists. But I'm just giving you heads up where people mess up. You base it on the CIS, but you don't customize it. Or you don't know what's going on with the OS, you get too complex, you try to do too much hardening at once, and you shut down production. If you enable every setting in a CIS guide, you will shut down your production. You have to know what you're doing and customize it. You have to figure that out, and if you don't have to have that knowledge, you need to go get it. MVPs rule this world, meaning you roll it out a little bit at a time. You got to test a bunch of it. An example is there's a hardening setting for Windows that used to be in the older guides around 2003, 2008. OSs. If you set this IP stack hardening sample, whenever you traversed a VLAN, you would triple your packets on the network. Flat out. That's what it did. So it was a really crappy setting. It was in every freaking hardening guide in the world. Reality is, if you tested it, you would have saw it, and most data centers are more segmented than they were when they put this in way back on the NT 4.0 hardening guide. So, and the other thing is not applying real world and sysadmin perspectives. Sysadmins need to run scripts. You can have things lock out after 15 minutes, but then have a way for them to lock the session so they can keep running scripts, etc. You need to work with your sysadmins. I came from a sysadmin background, so it's easy for me to do because I knew all the stupid stuff that draconian security people tried to do that really didn't do a whole lot for security, but just made life a pain in the butt for people. So don't err on the side of turn everything on when you're hardening. You're just going to discredit yourself and cause outages. This is the smart Alex slide on it. I've seen people do this. Here, harden your Oracle. Here's a PDF of 300 pages. Awesome. That doesn't do anyone any good. Patch management, prioritization. Everyone gets into all the arguments of CVSS good or bad or whatever. Here's the deal. All your commercial products have their own knowledge bases. They do their own ratings. Maybe take the top category or the top 2 categories and work on those. If you're on a Microsoft platform, take all of the Microsoft security patches every month and throw them out there once you can get your patch windows established. I know it's easier said than done. And honestly, with Oracle, anyone in this call that's got Oracle where you're patching it 4 times a year, you are doing the best you're ever going to do with Oracle. So that's outstanding. By the way, getting those kind of change windows from businesses for critical databases can take 2 to 3 years. Patch management's not something you're going to jack in place in a year. If you think you are, you're delusional. It takes years to get patch management going and socialized and build up that credibility to where it becomes a normal routine. So then you got differences between OSs, servers versus workstations, etc. You need to be able to have a way to handle exceptions because they're going to come up. You're going to have certain apps that require Java. You're going to not want to be bugging people about it every month if you know you can't do anything about it until there's a major rewrite of the application. Bug them then and make sure as the application's being rewritten, you're being able to upgrade your Java, as an example. You need to also watch out for out-of-band patches. I can tell you in the environment I've been in, we have done out-of-band patching 10 times in 7 years, and we were right every time. If you do out-of-band patching based on Twitter, you're going to lose some credibility because everyone says put everything out right away. You need to find out, is it critical? Are a significant portion of your systems vulnerable? Does it lead to remote code execution or not? Is it mitigated by a current service? Do you have a WAF that can block something till you can patch in your normal cycle of 30 days, etc., right? Is it actively being exploited in the wild? How many versions of software are affected? These are the questions you ask us. What I do typically is, in my current world, we have a calculator that everyone on the platform teams knows about it. We run our calculations, add our little tweaks and tunes based on our gray matter expertise. Heartbleed, you need to patch right away. Some of the other SSL ones, not so much, because sometimes you'll look at what the attack would take and how complex it is, and it's like, you can keep your normal 30-day patch cycle, just make sure you get this one in this month, right? So you need to have an intelligent out-of-band patch way of handling it, so you're not just telling everyone patch everything all the time based on something you saw on the internet. You also have to have this because it protects you from when your executives do see something on the internet that's getting blown up, and you can say, we don't need this in our environment and here's why, or we do. When we call out of patches in my environment, no one ever questions them because we walk them through how we calculate whether or not to spend the money to have the staff working extra and to forego other work. There's a cost to patching, make no mistake. So, and then there you go. You get your score, you go with it. It's a known assessment. We do the same assessment for anything that comes up and hits the news. So we get the same level of service, same analysis. It's a known issue. So you have your out-of-band process is as important as having your normal patch process. So again, biggest mistakes, you don't involve and train other teams. No processes for when you destroy shit. That means when you have service outages, do you have a way to troubleshoot to see which service was affected? Do you have ways to modify your scans to stop disrupting that service, right? Sometimes people try to bite off everything at once. And again, with here, don't throw people a PDF and say, please fix this. Set your standards. Maybe it's only the top level vulnerabilities in your product is the ones that you're worried about, right? Not doing the math to see how long your scans take and getting your scans windows right is an issue. And again, sometimes prioritization can take longer than fixing. When you get into all these esoteric arguments about whether it's in Metasploit or what's the CVSS score, you're starting to get into arguments where if you took your vendor and what your vendor says in urgent and rolled all those patches out, your shit would be patched by the time you have half these conversations done. So again, vulnerability management, it does discovery of missing patches. Some of the tools will do misconfigurations. Some of the applications it'll find vulnerabilities in. Discovering rogue stuff, if you do range-based scanning, is a good thing. Verifying your agents are out there. Again, continuous process. I refuse to make circle slides. I was once upon a time going to make a circle slide that was literally, what was it? Dump, wipe, flush, repeat. So I don't like circle slides. This one is one that usually is one. I'm going to go over to a little bit where this is just more on, you can review later because it'll be up on my website. Time of day scanning is important for remote sites versus data centers. How often you scan stuff. Nowadays, I've always been scanning data centers weekly, and then range-based scanning versus inventory-based to let you catch rogues. Haven't found a good way to handle going across VPNs or wireless. And again, remediation could be multiple things: hardening, patching. architectural changes. You might realize you need more segmentation in your network based on what you're seeing. Sometimes you might need to implement a tool for something. Firewalling, again, biggest mistake that people have been missing since the early 2000s is egress filtering. It's very hard to validate and get the time to nmap around your environment and find out where the holes are in your firewalls. Hard to keep them documented if you don't document inside the rules themselves. The other thing I see people doing is trying to lock down every port and protocol between every single host. If you have backup servers that need to back up your data center, open up the backup ports from the backup servers to your freaking data center. It ain't worth the time to have to enter a change control to do that for every one of your thousands of hosts you put on and off the network. Probably not doing a lot for security. If they subvert your backup system, all those individual rules that you put in and to waste the time doing, they're going to get those anyway through the backup server. See where I'm at? So you're opening it up to other stuff that there may or may not be addresses there. I get that. Time benefit, cost benefit analysis. Pervasive services make service-based rules in your firewalls. IDPS, biggest thing I see is people start putting intrusion detection and prevention all over the network. I walk in and say, so where's your concentrators for B2B VPNs? Over there. Is there an IPS in front of them? No. I'm like, you know, that's the easiest one to do first. User VPNs, all your VPNs, put the IDPS in there first. Put the IPS blocking just the 12 major things that go shitty on Microsoft. Pretty easy to do. Make sure you know how failover works, because if you got a single box and you think that's going to fail over appropriately versus two boxes connected to external taps, you're going to get a surprise outage. You know, everyone, oh, you can just pull this piece out and hot swap it. Good luck with that one. Not probably going to work the way that you handled it. And also, people don't budget for tuning and maintenance. Anti-malware, biggest thing here. If you have normal AV, start playing with the heuristics. You'll be surprised what it'll do. You still got to do some care and feeding, and you might want to know what your anti-malware can do for IOCs, like something like SEP can actually consume YARA rules. So that might be part of your IOC consumption strategy that you're putting in place. I hate DLP. It's not data loss prevention. It's preventing inadvertent data loss. And you got to cover in use, in motion, and at rest. Most people miss the first point at all. They actually think they're going to stop the bad shit. You're not. You're going to catch the dumb shit, for lack of better terms, or the inadvertent mistakes. Advanced endpoint protection. Do you have your heuristics going on your AV first? Do you have your AV fully in place first? Or is it just this sucks, it's pattern-based, the hell with it, and we're going to put this shiny new thing in, it's going to save the world, which it's not. And are you adding this into your IOC consumption strategy? Have you planned time and staff for hunting, etc.? Do you realize you're going to have to tune the shit out of this thing? What I'm seeing now is sometimes it's worth paying companies that will come in and run attacks live and tune the stuff so you can have your stuff like a Carbon Black or something that'll detect curb roasting right away, because that threat never really goes away. Although if you have thousands of service accounts and you can change your passwords long enough to over 30 characters, you can buy some time on the crack time on it, right? WAFs, another big one. People do not ever have the time to tune WAFs. One of my pet peeves. If you ain't going to have the time to do it, don't expect more out of it. And you'll be surprised how many levels down you are or aren't protecting your website when you look into it. And then again, you got to have an exception process. And a lot of times people don't test any types of failovers with their WAFs. So WAFs are a pain in the butt. You're going to have them anyway in today's day and age, but it's going to take more time to use them than you think. And you're probably going to need to get people trained on web application hacking to some extent. Even if you're paying for all your pen tests externally, which is not a bad thing, you're probably going to want to get someone up to speed a bit on web app hacking so they can defend against it better. Wireless intrusion prevention, biggest thing I think is just they don't really use it. They don't have a process for accounting for and hunting down the rogues, and they always underestimate the tuning, especially in retail environments. Log management, begin with the end in mind. Figure the 10 or 15 things you really care about and want to know about. Figure out what log sources you need. Understand that if you have to do custom integrations, you're going to have to refresh those integrations when software changes. Understand what audit settings your device needs to give you the data that you want. So tuning is a lot more than a month. You're not going to put it in quickly and get a whole lot of benefit. And then again, you got to watch your licensing models. Is it based on disk space, EPS, events per second, etc. Biggest gotchas for log management. And again, if you have syslog, do you have clustering so you can take syslog data in no matter what happens? Or if one of your collectors goes down, do you start losing all your syslog data? How do you back up this stuff if you need to? Sizing for peak loads, etc. And querying and reporting, you might have to offload to separate systems. Odds are in a large enterprise environment, which is what I usually live in, so I tend to speak to that, you're not going to do this with 1 or 2 or 3 boxes. You're going to have more than that typically. UBA is a nice dream to shoot for, not something you might want to try when you're first going at it. You might first want to get the 10 or 15 things you really care about and make sure that those can be alerted on correctly and that they're high fidelity alerts. In other words, when you see the egress, if you have an egress rule for anything in the company that's encrypted leaving, if you're a big enough environment, that might not be a high fidelity alert. Web app security is just getting better and better now with the DevSecOps in some respect. Again, my biggest caution there is you got to really understand web app hacking, and you got to invest in your people so they understand that. FIM is an interesting one. It gets forced onto people for PCI. It was a good idea when it started, but it doesn't scale well. I almost kind of like doing the reverse in some environments and just go with something like canary tokens, because when someone hits a token, that's, you know, it's a high fidelity event. They shouldn't have hit that. If you're going to do FIM, think small. A few system files, not an entire system directory of stuff that might change with regular patching, etc. So it's a tough one to put in there. If you're in a PCI environment, you're going to have to. If not, you might think of turning it on its end and going with something like Think's Canary and doing some canary tokens in your environment for high fidelity. Proxies, again, in the new world, are we moving to agent-based because everything's encrypted? So you're going to have agents for your proxy. Maybe your CASB and proxy agents will combine, right? And then again, I just put a couple things in with cloud just to watch out for. Basically, you're still going to have to architect your provisioning correctly. Key management's going to be different between on-prem and off-prem potentially. You got to pay attention to forensics in the cloud. There is a new skill set needed. Some of your tools are going to have to be a tool for the on-prem stuff and a tool for the cloud stuff as you're moving in hybrid mode, right? And the other one I say for contract fails is, you know, when you buy SaaS solutions, are you making your vendor liable for stuff like make sure they have vulnerability management, make sure they have penetration testing, right to audit, stuff like that. There's a lot to that. BYOD just increases the fun. I'm just going to go over that one for now. Threat Intel boils down to a lot of times consumable IOCs. I use Twitter. I haven't had any of the commercial feeds beat Twitter for keeping me in the realm of what's going on, but the commercial feeds are nice because they're watching it 7x24, and me and my team might not be able to. So Threat Intel is kind of an interesting beast because for the stuff I've needed to worry about, I've watched them. Okay, there's an exploit for this. It hits Twitter right away. So Twitter is actually really good for Threat Intel. I did have to do some tuning to get it down to just be Threat Intel on my feed and dog pictures. So by the way, if any of you check out my Twitter account, it's just mostly dog pictures, and I'm just there trying to get Threat Intel. I don't do well in speaking in short bites, which you can probably tell. So like, I'm old, I'm in my 50s. Twitter doesn't work for me as well, or I should say I don't work for Twitter or whatever. IoT devices are going to be a nightmare. One of the things we're doing early on is just making sure we segment the crap out of everything. A lot of the stuff you can put on its own segment, let it go to the internet to get its updates. It can't come back in on your corporate networks. You're really going to look into the Purdue model that they use for SCADA environments. Probably use the wrong term, apologies. You're going to do a lot more segmentation with IoT. Do not let the fish tank be on your corporate network, right? And then again, forensics versus incident response or DFIR. It's easier to contract out the forensics part, but you still need to make sure your log management's ready for when you need it, and you still need to make sure your IR processes are yours, because that's how your company responds, legal and all that other kind of stuff. And again, in security tools in general, what I see, no one accounts for run and maintain. You're probably not going to be allowed to anyway. Install versus implementation. Implementing a solution is using the tool within the process, et cetera. It starts with people, process, then technology. Just installing a product, clicking buttons, enabling features, and playing around and never really reading the book on it fully, not going to get you that far. I can always tell when someone has an install versus an implementation. An implementation implies a process. You have your services and solutions catalog for your team. You know what you do, and equally importantly, you know what you can't do. You know what's in scope, you know what's not in scope. You know what your assumptions are for each service offering. You have metrics to make sure the service offerings are carrying on properly. It's people, process, technology. That's never going to change. And everyone says this, and then you go into an environment and all you see is a bunch of freaking tool installs. Happens all the time. Again, different ways of documenting stuff. This could all be separate sections in a document. How do you update and patch it? What's the DR? How do you generate reports? How do you purge data and keep the data clear? If you have integrations with IPSs in the old days, IDSs, and your Unix box changes to a Windows box overnight and you didn't tell your vuln management platform that and it merged the data, you're going to have weird protections coming out of your automated protection from your IDS. Shit like that. You got to think how you're going to maintain the data and all this stuff, right? So basically to get higher CMM, integration, automation is a nice word. People automate too soon, in my opinion. I see it over and over. If you don't have a good process that's in place manually, why automate it? Or if you don't have a good process in general, why try to more fully automate it? And you just need to make sure you can repeat stuff. This is just a basic CMM chart. I'm a smart aleck. CMM5's perfection. But really, you have no documentation. You're just installing stuff, no trend reporting. You're starting to make customizations. You don't really have a good idea on how you're going to integrate into the environment. My goal is usually to get most tools to about a CMM3, because if you can do that with the dirty dozen that you got here, which actually translates to more tools than just 12 usually, especially in the DevSecOps world, you're doing pretty good. And you're probably spending about the right amount of money to do due diligence and care for your environment. So in my opinion too, one of the things we don't do enough of is training. I've got some thoughts on training here you can go over later. Offensive Security has very affordable training on learning how to hack. These are probably out of date pricing, by the way. I use the crap out of Udemy for some of the newer cloud stuff. I have a personal account. You've got Cybersecurity, ProSlite, Portswigger has good stuff up. You just see, I just put links out there because again, I'll get to the cloud certs. I'm going to get to the website. I'll have the presentation on the website at some point today. And I believe I used up the time. Hopefully I didn't go over because I know I had a little bit of a late start. So my apologies. So at that website, I'll put this presentation because you can get the links to the stuff later. But again, like I said, the main point there is people just literally shortchange on training. I think companies in general should put more money into their people on training. All right. I can't hear you. Could be my issue. I'm not on mute. Mine shows not on mute. Huh, interesting. I can't hear you. Oh, okay. Sorry.
You can hear me now?
Now I can. Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
So I have a question for Derek from Discord. Could you expand on what the problem was with VLAN's tripling packets on a Windows network?
So it was
all of it.
It was a specific setting in Windows in the TCP stack hardening guide, and I always forget for me the life of it. You flip it in the registry from a 0 to a 1, and when you go across VLANs, it splits your packets off into 512K, so you'd end up actually tripling your packets across VLANs. Really bizarre. It's an old one. I'm not even sure if it's in the newest list. I just use it because it bit me years ago.
Okay, I'm just checking the chat real quick. I don't see any other questions, Q&A. Let me hop on Discord real quick. I'm clear. Okay, thank you so much, Derek.
All right. I appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully it wasn't too fast. I was just trying to get the brain dump in on time.
All right, I think we're good to go. Thank you.
All right, take care.
We will be back at 11 o'clock with Aaron Turner on how Microsoft owned your SaaS. So be back at 11.